Hello, everyone. Welcome to Planetary Gig Talk. I'm Jefferson Glassy, Chief Spiritual Dude of the Planetary Gig Society, whose mission is creating unity through music. But as I like to say, making connections through music with the intention of bringing peace. And today I'm really delighted to be able to interview and talk with a fabulous musician and sort of a musical medicine man in a way. I don't know. We'll scope this out and see. Brian Festa, thanks so much for being with us today.
I'm very happy. Thanks for inviting me on.
Yeah. So I met you through the Wooten Woods alumni camper group, and you've talked a little bit about some of the things that you do and some of your dreams and aspirations, and I find them to be really cool and interesting, and some things that I think people would like to hear about. Sort of, where are you now? Where are you in New York? Is that where you live?
So I'm in upstate New York, getting ready to move actually to San Diego, which is really exciting for me. But until then, I'm going to keep living the wonderful, rich, amazing life that I can create at every moment here in upstate New York. And it's about 90 minutes north of the city in a little town called Accord.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I love that area. I'm loving it more and more, actually. Finger Lakes and all that. So, well, first of all, if you don't mind just talking a bit about how did music come into your life? I mean, when did music tap you on the shoulder and you said, oh, I need to do something about this? I mean, were you fairly young or a little bit older? Were your parents musical? What kind of music background do you have, and what was your trajectory in music?
It's a great question. So I remember pulling out the drawer of all the pots and pans. There's the stereotypical memories of banging on pots and pans. And I think the first actual drum that I received was a concert snare drum with an arm with a little splash cymbal on it. And so those are my earliest memories of doing snare drum rudiments in my home. And then getting into, concert band and the general trajectory that we do when we go through school, those of us who are lucky to be born into kind of like the first world system, and we can be supported and put through school in that way. And so I was thankful that my parents supported me in that way. And so it began with a little snare drum and then learning all of the basic concert instruments like bass drum and crash cymbals and eventually drum kit, and on from there.
Wow. So you really, percussion is what grabbed you at a pretty early age.
I could have played the flute. That way I would have a lot less things to lug around, but it's a passion. Every culture has a drum, and I'm fascinated. I call myself an informal ethnomusicologist. Traveled to a bunch of different countries and continents in the world to study, and continually fascinated with the percussion that is so inherent in so many indigenous cultures all around the world.
Wow. What have you seen in the indigenous cultures? I mean, they have drums all the time, or they're constantly doing things to the rhythm, or what could you tell us about some of those your impressions of some of those trips?
Well, we have a limited time, so much, Jefferson. So little fun fact that most, if not all, cultures have some sort of frame drum, which is just a single-sided drum where they either beat with a mallet or play with their hands. In the shamanistic elements of the shamanistic roots of all cultures, really, it began with voice and with drumming. And those are really the most basic kind of precepts of just their way of life. It's funny how now in conventional world that music is viewed as almost a supplementary skill or a supplementary craft, a supplementary trade or career. And, back in the day, and luckily still in many indigenous cultures and modern cultures, that music is supported in a deeper way. I remember when I went to Croatia and studied for the first time abroad classical percussion, and being around all those musicians that grew up with such a deeper support throughout their schooling. Like, they were all crushing it by the time they were university level. They were already pretty much professional musicians. Mm. And everybody had a piano in their dormitory. Everybody could play piano proficiently. And I found out that they go through elementary school specifically geared towards music. They go to a middle school and later secondary school that is music focused. They go then through a high school that is actually like a music high school, which is super fascinating. So the ingraining and the way that other cultures and modern cultures like bring up their musical population was really fascinating to me. And I know I steered off topic just a little bit, but man, so many, an amazing facet that I love about other cultures' music is how they play with time and mixed meter. Mm-hmm. So, like in India and in North Africa and Persia and East Indian instruments and Arabic time signatures, 7, even like 9.5 and 13. And the way to vocalize the rhythms as well is very different as well. We learned here in the Western world like 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4 and they learn like takata takata dimi takata takata dimi takadimi takajina takata takata dimi. So it's very fascinating.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I mean, here in the U.S. we think we sort of know it all, and we got rock and roll and all that. But yeah, in terms of rhythms and tones and things like that, there's so much to learn. Would love to talk with you more about the indigenous people sometime. But so how did you end up to now? What you're up to now? I mean, you've been, the power of music, the power of percussion kind of grabbed you. You've I'm sure been in groups and bands and things like that. And what recently have you been doing? And how does that tie in with the power of music?
Great question, Jefferson. So in the past many years, I got very, very into world music. And so the amassing of instruments has been taking up lots of physical space. And so that's been a joy. And so usually the gigs that I'm playing these days, I'm bringing so many different types of percussion. I played a gig last week with 2 other percussionists with their own unique setup, and that was a real treat. Ken Lovelet and Brian, I forget his last name. I just met him, but he's a phenomenal percussionist here in the Hudson Valley. And so recently actually has been not as much music and more so the bringing together and building community through the integration of wellness and music. So wow. I went through a lot of chronic pain starting a decade ago with my neck and shoulder that got me into massage and all the different holistic modalities. And so eventually I created a few years ago a nonprofit, Catalyst Music and Healing Arts, where we integrate holistic therapies into project-focused music retreats that are, I was about to say engineered, that are facilitated just for musicians.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, there's a lot of artist residencies, but very, very few that are just music-based, and pretty much none that really focus intently and intentionally on bringing together what it's like to live in a body and what we can do to benefit the body as our own instrument, to tune our own instrument, not just focusing on the craft, but facing the reality that we live in a body, we eat all kinds of things, we do all kinds of things, and we breathe. We all have the capability of taking care of ourselves, which musicians are, quote unquote, notoriously known for not doing. So my role in the world right now, in my personal work and also my nonprofit work, is to wed the intentionality of integrating holistic therapies into our daily life as a musician.
Wow, that is so deep and so, I think, important for people. I mean, you really, musicians do all sorts of things and work all kinds of jobs and, try to just play better and play with people, but, supporting them through kind of a community of knowledge and information, that sounds really awesome. And I think worthwhile. What are some of the things that you find with musicians that they should maybe put a little more focus on or attention to when they're playing, as they're going about their craft, as you may say?
What's interesting, Jefferson, is that before I answer that question directly, the main problem that musicians are telling me, of those that I work with, is time. And so it actually has nothing to do with their bodies at first. It's managing time. And so many people are doing the hustle. And so they actually have formed a belief system based on this new structure of the way that we've structured our lives that, oh, I don't have time to do this. And that actually, a lot of it comes down to a belief that we don't have time. And once we get past the belief that we actually can carve out 10 minutes a day or 15 minutes a day, and that once we actually get into a practice and we start seeing the benefits and how vital and good that we feel to whatever practice that we're drawn to do, we are more motivated to create more time for that self-care because we know that the benefits are coming through that practice. And so as a practical thing for people to do, I've been really emphasizing the importance of a daily practice. So regardless of what you do, who you are, what body that you inhabit, that there are certain things that people gravitate to, that really makes them feel good, that have nothing to do with the work that they're doing in the world, but something that makes them feel good, of the holistic arts. So whether it's meditation or just sitting in silence or just going outside and taking a walk, that in itself is a holistic practice. It moves the body, it allows us to breathe, it allows us to get out of these four corners of rooms that we're consistently in day to day, allows us to experience the real church of the world. And it feeds us not only physically, mentally, but emotionally and spiritually. So.
Wow, so interesting. So I remember seeing a post of yours recently about, this might have been real recently, where you said, so what did you do today? And you listed all the things that you had done. And there was a big long list of things that looked kind of cool. Took a walk, thought about this, did yoga for a few minutes, did this, played a little, and it was really interesting to see because you can accomplish a lot. I guess if you're sort of intentional about what you're doing. And it's interesting to me because musicians have to be very intentional about learning an instrument. I sort of started a little bit late in life, and I'm not 16 years old in my in garage or something. I have to be more intentional with the other things that are going on, and so musicians are very intentional. But it's interesting what you're saying about the time to do all the things they need is something that they could be a little more intentional and perhaps rhythmic about, have an actual sort of practice or routine. Does that sound about right? Or
that's a great point. And I've found that with the people that I've worked with, the intentionality varies in degree depending on how much they are depending on music for their livelihood. So, for example, a rock musician, maybe they have a day gig and they're just spending time on music kind of part-time. But classical musicians, those who are actually salaried and they're health and wellness and their career depends on how good that they are and how often that they show up at the top of their game.
Mm-hmm.
And what's very interesting is that those musicians, since they're practicing and rehearsing and performing so much, that they develop repetitive strain and chronic pain. And it's a very well kept secret because they don't want to risk their careers. And so it's really intriguing to me that this population of musician is very intentional, but it's actually, if they don't have the holistic and kind of upkeep that they do, really taking time to take care of themselves in that way, all those hours really end up accumulating over time, and ends up being not so good.
Wow. So you need to put in the time to become a good musician, but if you put in a lot of time over and over and over and over every day, then it can also have physical and I suppose even, mental or other effects just on your life.
Absolutely. And especially the salaried musician and people and musicians that are gigging full time, no matter what their genre is, they depend on that, and so they're small muscle athletes, as we say. And so
yeah,
it's not apparent that they're in a football game and they hurt their shoulder. It's a slow burn. Chronic pain is a slow burn, and people end up living with it. They end up, oh, I've been dealing with this for a while. It's not so bad, but still, every bow stroke that you play, and then after all of those long rehearsals with your orchestra, you are feeling that pain. And because people prioritize things that are coming over their self-care, things end up accumulating, and the cumulative effects of those repetitive motions end up kind of like creeping in, and it's a shame because people get really used to it. And it's not just musicians, people who steadily gain weight for whatever reason. They start just like, oh, okay, I'm just gaining weight. And it's so slow that it just becomes a part of their life. And it's an acceptance of what is happening. And what I love helping people with is like help people turn that around and to accept that there's a different reality ahead. And that's really empowering for myself and those people.
Wow, that's really good. Yeah, I remember one point my doctor said, everybody gains 2 or 3 pounds a year, but in 40 years, you just gained 80 to, it's a lot. So, it's a good analogy for explaining, for musicians, you may just have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but it's important to think holistically, I guess, and really about your musical practice. Now, so I'd like to ask one of the things that really intrigued me when I first met you virtually was this idea you have about you want to set up. Well, you'll have to explain it, but it's kind of a musician's place, retreat center, educational center, music ashram. I don't know. Do you mind talking a little bit about that? I'd love to hear you explain what your thoughts are about that. I know you're kind of getting going on it too, right?
It's my passion, man. Because I saw what it was like for me to go through as a professional musician, going back to school at the jazz school, the California Jazz Conservatory in Berkeley, California. And that was the impetus that, man, there are so many musicians that I'm seeing now that are also going through this, and it affects their everyday. Their playing ability, it affects their sleep, their emotions, their ability just to be cool, and their ability to maintain relationships and to have healthy interrelations with people, because of this subtle nagging, creeping of a low back pain or a shoulder pain. So it's very deep. And so in doing so, I eventually created Catalyst Music and Healing Arts. And so the long-term vision is to create a retreat center that is architecturally and programmatically designed for musicians. So as I said before, there's many artist residencies, but hardly any that are just for musicians. and hardly any that the actual structure that was built wasn't built to contain people making music. And so in all of the architecture renderings that we've done to really put forward the momentum of what this will look like manifested, we really thought about how things would be laid out: practice rooms, rehearsal rooms, professional music studios, recording studios, an indoor and outdoor venue, 300-400 people, a wellness center, a music center, long-term vision to have like a K through 12 school, like a private music school. And all rooms and studios fitted accordingly with proper soundproofing, which is really important. So often musicians go to centers or residencies, and we kind of deal with the psychological repression in a way because we don't want to like bother people with our music. And so what I aim to co-create is a place where, nah, man, that's the intention. Like, this is home for you. Like, we have built this for you. This is your home that you have always wished that you could go to, where you were fully supported in practicing and creating and doing what you do best with your craft.
Wow, I think it's just so inspiring and so, I don't know, needed in a way, building communities of musicians that help and support their musicianship and their artistry and their lives together. I kind of feel even like a movement towards some of that. There's Vic's Camp. You go for a week or two and live in that wonderful environment. And there's a number of different places. I was fortunate enough to kind of run into a music ashram in Rishikesh, India when I was there a few years ago. And it kind of changed my life. I never spent a night in it, but I walked up and saw music ashram, and they do all kinds of training, classes in classical Indian music and sound baths and sound healing and sitar performances, and just have a beautiful feeling and intention about the whole thing. So I really think you're tapping into something. And was this, have you figured out a place for this to be your first one, or a physical location for it?
I would love for it to be in the Hudson Valley, in Hudson Valley, New York, for a few reasons. That the close proximity to such amazing world-class musicians and vocalists it's unlike most places in the world. The Hudson Valley is super rich with really, really great players up here. And, the city has millions of them. And so and also the amount of professional musicians that come through New York and through the city is also a nice thing. That like, hey, before your gig or after your gig, we have this amazing center that you can go to rejuvenate and work on stuff and work on both yourself and your craft while you're, in this part of the world. That being said, winters, man. The winters.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm kind of a wimp, man. I'm going to admit I moved up here for a few years, and I hadn't lived up here for 15 years in the Northeast. I've been traveling and studying all around everywhere, in the South, in the West, Europe. And I think my subconscious knew that I wasn't really fit, ideally, for Northeast winters. So this is something that I'm going to have to kind of like chew on and just kind of put on the back burner as far as a physical location. Maybe, yes, I would love that idea. As far as what I need to do, and this kind of brings us back to what are musicians doing so that they can take care of themselves. I can have all of these dreams to create the center and spend all of this money and gather all of these people. But if I am living in a place where I feel like that I need to escape, or my body doesn't feel like that it's currently thriving in, that's the reason that for now I've decided to relocate to Southern California, because I have a herniated disc that is almost near being healed. I'm getting some like minor surgery to burn up the sensory nerves, which has been a long process that I've been waiting for, which I'm really excited for. I'm functional, but I want to be as a human being in a place where I can thrive, not just survive. And so for me, my happiness is highly contingent on the weather and climate at this point in my life. And so, which is the main reason why I'm relocating to Southern California. And who knows what the future will hold. But as far as the physical location, maybe I set down some really deep roots there. And the first of many centers gets born in Southern California. And then as soon as we start building relationships with people with deep pockets and big hearts that want to support the vision in that way, and we develop a track record slowly, that we can think about doing something in the Northeast as well. And one final thing, that being said, the Catalyst program can also be retrofitted in any place in the world that's already existing. It just won't be the ideal kind of vision of everything is architecturally built and soundproofed and all of that. So I'm excited that with the power of people and programming, that we can bring this vision essentially anywhere.
Wow, sounds like a great plan, Brian. And I'm one who kind of believes in order to achieve something, you first got to think about it. And you have a very strong intention and perceptions of life and what it takes to be a musician and all kinds of different holistic aspects of that. So I'm sure that you're on your way and on the path, and I'll be visiting your first retreat center before we know it.
Thank you, Jefferson.
Let me ask one other thing. I think you've been talking about doing some another thing. Not separate from the retreat center, but some conferences or something like that. Did you want to talk about that, or am I asking the right question? I'm not sure I am.
Are you referencing the work that I do with musicians and workshops and coaching, or something else?
Well, you could mention that, the workshops and coaching. I think you were planning some sort of an event, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes.
maybe talk about both of those a little bit. That'd be great.
Oh yeah, I'm happy to. So Catalyst, rather than doing an in-person retreat for musicians, and because I personally need more time and bandwidth to develop my personal career as a coach and consultant for musicians, that we're doing a virtual retreat on October 1st and 2nd from 11 to 2 Eastern Standard Time.
Cool. Okay. That's very interesting. Yeah. What's going to be there? What?
So we've teamed up with like world-class facilitators, musicians and educators that are going to cover a lot of different topics that range in both the music, the wellness, and also the career aspects of what it's like to be a musician in the world. So professional resiliency, self-care practices, improvisation, world music traditions. I said professional resiliency, and like yoga for musicians, music as a spiritual practice, social media marketing. Let's see, what else?
That sounds like a whole lot. That's really cool. And I'm sure you'll put it out on Facebook and whatever channels that we have. So that sounds very cool. And your general practice is that you're developing the coaching and what have you. That's really just for individual musicians who might want to look further into some of these things for their own benefit, right?
Absolutely. A massage client of mine, when I was telling him about my long-term vision for Catalyst, he said, "That's great, because musicians are notorious for not taking care of themselves."
Yeah.
And so go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I took that idea as a nonprofit, and I am currently, this year, have been starting to work with people on an individual basis in a very intentional way. So they go through a program that's 8 weeks that is very transformative, that we get down to the root of whatever challenges that they're going through, and we systematically and intuitively get to the root of all of that and begin to really keep it real with what's going on and what's holding you back from being at your most optimum level, both as a human being and in your health and wellness, and also as a musician, because both of those things are inexplicably inexplicably congruent with each other. So as a health and wellness practitioner, I combine my knowledge and skill of massage and yoga and posture and ergonomics and breathwork, meditation, mindfulness practices. And then there's the career-oriented planning and the optimization and organization. And I have a way of really helping to compassionately keep it real with people. And it really allows them, through different tools and through different systems that I've kind of like honed in, that I curtail to each individual. And it's a really delightful process to see people come in, kind of like get down to the bare bones of everything, and then we start building back up both the wellness side and the organizational side and the musical side all together. And it's just such a beautiful thing to see people grow in that way.
Wow, that's so fantastic. So, we're just about to wrap up here, but how do people get in touch with you? What are your websites or whatever they should look for?
Sure. So the coaching and consulting practice is musicianmedicine.com. And also on Instagram, it's Musician Medicine. And for the nonprofit work, it's Catalyst MAHA. It's the acronym of Music and Healing Arts, MAHA. So catalystmaha.org. And if people want to sign up for the free virtual retreat, it's all free. All of these facilitators are donating their time, 15 to 20 minutes of discussion of all of these topics. So it's really exciting that they believe in the vision enough that they're open to not being compensated. And I really do believe that musicians should be compensated. And we decided to do a retreat that is fully free for the participants and fully free for the people that are participating as facilitators. And so I'm so grateful for the people that believe in the nonprofit work that we're doing and are contributing their time to that. So it's October 1st and 2nd, and it's from 11 to 2. And it's going to be on Zoom. We'll send you a link. So you just sign up on the website at catalystmaha.org.
Okay, cool. And you're at Brian at musicianmedicine.com, right?
Yes, that's my email. Yeah.
Okay, well, Brian Festa, thanks so much for taking the time to join, talk a little bit about this. I've been very fascinated in what you're doing since I met you, and I assume that other people also, musicians in particular, will be, there's good information for them and things to think about. So really appreciate it, for all of you out there. Remember to check out planetarygigs.org for some of our new programs. Planetary Music Project, a recent video visit we did to Santa Fe. We've got some coming up for trips to Greece and Navajo Reservation, talking about the power of music and our commonalities through music around the world, and concerts for democracy and all that. So check out planetarygigs.org. But Brian Festa, thank you so much for this, and we'll look forward to actually meeting in person sometime. I hope I can make that virtual retreat you have coming up.
And thank you so much for giving a platform for these talks to happen. Really appreciate it, Jefferson.
Okay, everybody. Thank you very much.